5 Live Formula One.
Good morning from Abu Dhabi at the Yas Marina circuit. We are very much at the end of term for 2024 as Formula One is here for its final round of the season. We've reached 24 of 24 and we have one final practice session. Once again, beginning in the daylight before dusk will loom later on this afternoon and qualifying will get going. The floodlights will come on, illuminating this just over 5.2 kilometre track. That is well-known terrain for all 20 drivers and well-known to us as well. So hopefully we'll be able to guide you through it all. It's myself, Harry Benjamin, alongside the former Formula One driver Jolyon Palmer up in the commentary box, and our eyes and ears on the ground. Let's say good morning to Jenny Gow. Morning, Jen.
Good afternoon, of course, here. It's a beautiful afternoon as we stand here. The flags are fluttering. It is a bit breezy compared to yesterday. There are a couple of clouds in the sky, but they're those delightful little fluffy ones that you draw as a child. Just a few of those, and another cracking vista in front of me. There's loads of yachts in the marina. I got that right today, and they've all got their flags on the yacht ropes going up, and they look splendid. And my stat for you for today is there are 222 berths in this marina that we race around and that the F1 cars flow furiously through, and I thought that would be, that's a lot of boats. We have 20 F1 cars, but 222 berths for yachts.
I imagine, thank you, Jenny, excellent stats to kick things off with. I imagine Monaco has probably got more, 700 I'm hearing
absolutely.
From Monaco. And more and more now we're getting, even in the fake marina in Miami, they've got quite a few there. Well, they did in the first year, didn't they? Actually, question for you, Jolyon Palmer, former Renault Formula One driver alongside me. How many circuits on the calendar have the word marina in them?
Well, you got the Marina Bay circuit.
Well done.
Of Singapore. You got Yas Marina, and I'd have thought that's it, isn't it?
There's one more.
I want to say Singapore, but I'm not sure it.
We've had, he said that Singapore, Marina Bay.
Oh, sorry. I was listening to everything you said, Jolyon.
No, there actually isn't another one. It's just quite fun to see you really think hard.
Okay.
Yeah, no, two from two on that one. We are, though, at the second of the marina circuits in the calendar, chronologically, the Yas Marina circuit. And as Jenny said, the sun is still absolutely out for this session. So the only representative session we've had really was yesterday in free practice 2, which Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri finished P1 and P2. The McLaren's looking strong out of the block. So, Jolyon, this is a track that you've raced around in Formula One and in your junior career as well. Talk us through it from the driver's perspective.
Well, it's changed since I actually raced on this. It changed for 2021, the epic finale, and it's a lot faster than it used to be. You've got the first sector that is one corner. It's a 90-degree left-hander pretty much. You can technically run wide over track limits, and then you're flying through turns 2 and 3 and 4 up the hill through the left, right, and then slight curve to the left. But it's all absolutely flat out, a little bit bumpy. And we heard some kind of curb strike damage reports there yesterday. So something still to focus the drivers' minds, but basically one corner in the first sector. The middle sector is long straights. It blasts in the tiny braking zone into turn 5, then out of that all the way down to turn 6, a left-right chicane, another long straight down to turn 9, which used to be a fiddly little left-right-left flick over curbs. Now it's a really quick sort of 180, 200-degree corner that comes right back on itself, but it's fourth gear, and you barrel in speed, and that takes you into the final sector, which is around the hotel. Again, is opened up to try and give us better racing as of 3 years ago, and it is now quite quick around the hotel. It's probably the twistiest sector, still the most critical sector for lap time, and I quite like the circuit because you've got 3 very different sectors.
Do you think that those changes made a couple of years ago now, well, when they're firmly embedded in, do you think they have made the racing better on a whole? Do you think it's made the track better?
It's a nicer track, that's for sure. It used to be, it's a lovely venue, Abu Dhabi, the Yas Marina circuit. You've obviously got the 222 berths in the marina. That feels like a lot, doesn't it? it feels like an awful lot of berths for the yachts to come in, but hey, it is spectacular. You got the hotel, but it used to be a bit of a fiddly track. Wasn't that easy to overtake either. So they made the changes. It's way faster, more flowing, and it's better to overtake. It's a tick from me.
A tick from Jolyon Palmer in the box for this circuit. Well, no one is in a big rush to head out. We're getting some lovely helicopter shots of the marina and just trying to do.
So the berths go round the back of the paddock, don't they? So it's all through the paddock, and then it comes back towards the third last corner.
So some hidden berths behind.
And then it goes all the way around towards the back of turn 9 as well. So Monaco, they're so focused around the harbour, the swimming pool sector, the Nouvelle Chicane, iconic terms, Tabac. But that is where the harbour is, but I think it's more expansive here.
Well, the clock, it has already counted down. FP3 is underway for those who wish to do a sync up. It's 59 minutes and 8.76 seconds. No one in a huge rush to head out at the moment. Jenny, I believe you've made your way down to Ferrari.
I have. We have a sea of guests at the back of the Ferrari garage. If I look to my right, to the grandstands, not many people in them at the moment. Some of the certain papaya-clad fans are in there, and they are right in the sun at the moment, so they must be roasty toasted on that side of the grid. But on this side, as I said, I'm ahead of the Ferrari pair. Carlos Sainz to my left, and to my right it is Charles Leclerc, and of course Charles Leclerc picking up that 10-place grid penalty yesterday for a change of battery, which curtailed a lot of his running in FP1, and I think it's handed very much a firm advantage now to McLaren. Although you go to McLaren, which are just next door, I'll just wander my way down the pit lane and go to McLaren, and the guys are quite tense. They know what's at stake. 21 points is the gap between them and Ferrari, who are chasing them down for the Constructors' Championship. And that 10-place grid penalty means everyone's going up to the McLaren engineers, mechanics, the press people, everyone in the team, and saying, "Oh, nearly there." And they're just like, please don't say it, because whilst we think they're nearly there, they're just trying to keep it as normal as possible. Lando Norris just walked into the garage, his overalls around his waist, hands on his hips, looking at information with his engineer, and he's sporting a haircut I would love to see on either one of you gentlemen. It's very much a short back and sides, but like mullety on top. I'd like to see either of you rocking that.
I'm normally a short back and sides guy anyway.
I mean, so would I, but I'd say if anyone could pull off a mullet more, it's probably Palmer. Just as a hedge my bet on that one. No? Not interested?
Yeah, I'm not going to do it, but sounds fascinating.
Well, the good news is we have got two cars out on the circuit in the two Aston Martins. But just to come back to what Jenny was saying there about McLaren.
It's very new age, isn't it, the mullet?
Well, it's making a comeback.
Yeah, well, it's like all cyclical
it's like when
trends.
Vinyl was now quite popular again, you know.
Oh, the tinny sound, lovely.
But people like to have the massive, you know, the record players and the massive discs as well. Like that is it almost retro becomes the new cool again.
Yeah, and it trusts Lando Norris to be sporting that haircut.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Appealing to the youth.
Well,
he is.
He's got a brand to upkeep, hasn't he? Just on that McLaren chat, though, 1998. I mean, for Ferrari, it would be 2008. Momentum is with McLaren. Either way, if you actually take a step back, it's an amazing feat to have a non-Mercedes or a non-Red Bull taking the Constructors' title come the end of the checker flag on Sunday. It just kind of shows from where we were in Bahrain at the start of this year. I mean, no one could have predicted that.
No one could have predicted so many things from this season from Bahrain. I've been to pre-season testing for the last 4-5 years, and I've never seen something that's been so unpredictable as this year. Okay, Verstappen's won the title, but having McLaren, Ferrari, Mercedes and Red Bull all achieving 1-2 finishes, 7 drivers have won multiple Grand Prix. It's never happened before. The top 7 of the championship have all won at least twice this season. You've had a complete turnaround in the form guide, so Verstappen's actually been fighting a rearguard action to keep his championship when it looked like it was 2023 all over again. As we got to China and Japan, he was marching away with it. It's been quite an incredible season. I've loved it because as we've got into the end of the first third and Norris got his win in Miami, the field closed up with McLaren's upgrades. Ferrari were getting closer, then Mercedes came to the front. Every weekend, you just don't know what's going to happen. Even last week in Qatar, it looked like McLaren had the title all but sealed. Suddenly there's a big penalty and Ferrari take a huge chunk out of their lead. It's fun. And even now, McLaren should be starting to think about the T-shirt packaging.
I think it's going to be a good day. A good feeling.
Good.
That's the sound of someone who's had a long, hard think about things after yesterday. Yeah, he was grumpy yesterday, wasn't he?
He's been grumpy since Qatar. Well, he's been grumpy for a lot of this season with the way Aston Martin have been on a bit of a spiral.
Yeah.
Let's face it.
Yeah, I think it's nice that Fernando Alonso is feeling a bit more positive. It is very nice for his engineers and the Aston Martin team that he's feeling a bit more positive. Just the two of them and Gasly on the track at the moment. Steady start for everyone else. Yeah, McLaren should be thinking about getting the Champions T-shirts ready, popping the champagne, but you just never know with this season how things are going to unfold. So they have to go through at least a very normal weekend. They have to have their normal preparations, because if you take your eye off the ball, you'll be punished for it in this field.
For me, this is probably the best overall season since maybe 2012 in the modern age. What would you say?
I think this has been a supremely underrated season because we've not had a driver's title battle that's gone down to the wire. 2012 we did in Brazil, and it was an iconic finish. Vettel charging through the field, Alonso with so many swashbuckling drives in the Ferrari that was inferior, 7 different winners at the start. But in the end, the races became a little bit more Red Bull had the advantage. What could Alonso do to limit the damage? Whereas I think race on race, we've not had a better season than this. You've not had 4 teams genuinely fighting for wins all the way through. I know Maldonado won in 2012 in the Williams, but that was a fluke. And, well, it was a well-executed fluke, but he never got close to another win. Whereas the regularity of having Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, Red Bull, all there at all the races, it's been a lot of fun. 2021, I think, is the standout year that was just amazing to cover, because the driver's title fight was so tense and it went right down to the wire. We've missed that this year, but we've had everything else.
What about you, Jenny?
Right, what in what
In terms of favourite best season since?
I think that the dynamic of this season has been good, as you say and suggest. We haven't had that all-out battle for a championship going right down to the wire, which I think will always detract a little bit. But this has been a great season. Don't get me wrong. This has been one of the best in terms of what's happening on track, off track, loads of driver movements, driver shake-ups, substitute drivers. So it's had it all. And I think more than that, it sets up next year perfectly. And I can't think of a year that I've been more excited at the end of the season, because in 2021 it was amazing and it went down to the wire, but no one knew if Hamilton was going to come back. So it took us all the way till testing for that to be answered. So this one, we know who's going to be the main players. We don't know if Perez is going to keep his seat yet. There's so many unanswered questions, but we know whoever is here, it will be 8 drivers maybe going for it, and that's going to be thrilling.
If the title fight was still on the line, I think this would be a decent shout for best season ever. The fact is not.
Ever?
Yeah, ever.
Ever?
Well, look, I think in the 80s there were a couple of wide open seasons. I think Keke Rosberg winning the title with... Did he have a Grand Prix win or no Grand Prix wins to his name in that year? We need Andrew Benson for that.
I think 1. Oh, no. I think none now, you're saying it.
But in terms of... Okay, if the title fight had gone down to the wire this year, best season ever. But, okay, we've mentioned 2021 because of the title fight, but the rest of the field, there wasn't that much to talk about. 2012, the title fight did go down to the wire, but the races in general, on a consistent basis, maybe weren't as entertaining what we've seen this year. So what is the best season of Formula One ever?
I mean, I've only been alive for 33 of them, so it's difficult for me to hark back
we've
too
got
long.
33 to analyse.
So in
You're trying
1982...
to play your young gun card.
No, I'm just trying to be honest with the listener here, Jenny. I'm missing a little bit of knowledge from pre-90s, but I'm going to fill you in on some of that. In 1982, Keke Rosberg won the title with just one race win, and the race wins that year was split between everyone in the top 11 in the championship. Unbelievable scenes in 1982. That is how you mix up the order.
That's pretty spectacular. Let's bring in the Oracle, the BBC's F1 correspondent, Andrew Benson. Afternoon, Andrew. Thoughts, feelings, best season ever?
No.
Oh no.
Okay, but
Can't have a championship ending two races before the can't have a championship ending 2 races before the end of the year and it be the best season ever, and there never really being a championship fight that was that close. It's been interesting. There's been some good races. 82, I don't think you can call the best season ever, even though it was amazingly open in lots of ways, because 2 people died, and one of them was the biggest star in Formula One. 2012 was a really good season, close all the way through, 7 different winners from the first 7 races. I think you've got to look at surely you have to look for sort of intense championship fights for best season ever. 21, for example, has got to be up there, even though there was only ever 2 people in it who were winning races most of the time. Those are the sort of things I would throw into the ring.
Okay, you make some fair points there. Jolien?
Gilles Villeneuve, 1982.
Yeah.
That's how far we've come.
The sport was in a totally different place back then as well.
Yeah, exactly. No, Andrew, I think my point really was that if we had a title fight going down to the wire, then there would be a case for this being the best season ever. Just because of everything else that's happened.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said about 7 winners from the top, from the top 4 teams. I think it's just a shame that it started the way it did. If it had started in Miami, then it would have been absolutely fantastic, wouldn't it? Verstappen still would have built up a bit of an advantage, I think, had that happened, but it would have been more surmountable than it was this year. I think that was the problem with this year. Everyone wanted there to be jeopardy, but was there really jeopardy? Norris was always a long way behind, and McLaren and Norris together didn't really mount a convincing case that they were going to get it together. I guess maybe I'd be talking differently about this if Brazil had been dry and not wet, or if the red flag period hadn't happened in Brazil. But it did, and Verstappen produced one of the greatest races in history, and that was the end of the championship fight, basically, wasn't it?
Jane, on hashtag BBC F1 Andrew, has suggested 1976, surely contender for best season ever. James Hunt,
definitely up there,
Niki Lauda.
Yeah, and there was, I think it was 1964 when it went to the last race, and John Surtees, Jim Clark and Graham Hill were all in for winning the championship. No one really remembers that because it was so long ago, obviously. Even I wasn't alive then.
What?
Is there a bit of rose-tinted glasses with 1976? Because I was also looking at 1994 yesterday, where Hill and Schumacher took it to the wire. But in those 2 seasons, you had, 3 or 4 races where one of the title rivals wasn't even competing. Lauda after his crash, Schumacher was DQ'd for a few races. That's tough to claim.
I'll tell you what as well, 1986 was really good. Alain Prost winning the title for McLaren, not in the fastest car, with the last race of the season, Mansell's tyre exploding when he was about to win the championship. That was pretty epic. There's been a few good ones, but to me this one's been interesting in parts, and there's been a lot of off-track stories as well to keep the entertainment up on a holistic level, but there hasn't been enough hasn't quite had enough of those ingredients to me to be all-time classic status.
No, but we've certainly been treated to a spectacular season this year, haven't we, in 2024. We have had a few cars out on the track, by the way. It's 45 minutes and 36 seconds remain. Stroll is fastest, then Doohan, Gasly are the top three cars only to have set any kind of lap time. Alonso currently on a push lap at the moment, just making his way out of the turn 6 and 7 chicane and towards the new left-hander that was introduced a couple of years ago. Jenny, I know you've got some tyre chat for us that you want to talk about.
Sorry.
What have you got for us? As much as I love tyres, let's hear it.
I know. So for the fourth time this season, no one ran a hard tyre yesterday. So it doesn't happen very often that no one runs a hard tyre. It's happened in Sakir, Melbourne and Las Vegas, as well as yesterday. I saw the Aston Martin stick on a hard tyre and go out. I think they only did one lap and then came back in. They also did a lap on the mediums and then came back in. So they're preparing, but I think that leads us to think that it's going to be a one-stop with the hard and medium tyres. So a lot of people trying to save their hard tyre just in case they need two sets. But that's how much I know, and I've just seen a Ferrari go out on a set of softs.
Thanks, Jen. Yeah, Pirelli bringing their softers in the range this weekend. We've just seen, I'll tell you what, Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin going down the back straight and having to do a little bit of avoiding work from a very low-flying bird that had almost a bit of a death wish there. But Alonso doing some avoiding driving and just swerving out the way to fight another day for both him and the bird. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari is indeed out on the circuit now, along with the two Saubers of Zhou Guanyu, Valtteri Bottas, the two Aston Martins still out there on the track, along with the two Haas cars of Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg. Their last weekends at the Haas team. Hülkenberg moving to Sauber next year before it becomes Audi, and Magnussen, well, he's off to sports cars. He's been signed as a BMW factory driver. Will we see him return in the future? He's already had 3 returns in Formula One. Couldn't rule out another one just yet, but we have got still scores to be settled this weekend up and down the grid.
I think it was the yellow vented bulbul that was the bird on the back straight that came nosediving at Fernando Alonso there, who, along with Lance Stroll, was the only drivers on the circuit. But we're getting a few more out on track right now. This is the sound of Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. 10th-place grid drop for him this weekend, and that is the hammer blow for Ferrari when they needed everything to go right. They're now going to need luck to pull this one off on Sunday. They're going to need a safety car, a red flag, or a shift up of the order, or simply bad luck to befall McLaren, because on pace, McLaren were the fastest yesterday. They looked really comfortable. The track suits them, especially with the track changes now speeding up, quickening up the circuit, opening up the slower corners. They looked good. Let's see how Leclerc looks on this opening lap. Down through 3 gears. A little bit hesitant on the throttle out of turn 1, now flat out through the left, sweeping through the right-hander over the crest, and we're going to get a first sector time for Charles Leclerc, compared only to Lance Stroll at the moment, with the Aston Martins hitting the track earlier, and he's actually a tad slower than Stroll in the first sector.
Yeah, makes his way now up through the gears, down the straight, just over 1.1 kilometre straight, that heads down towards the left-hander of turn 6, getting up to speeds of just over 320 kilometres an hour before you slam on the brakes through the left-hander, slightly uphill, and then onto the throttle out of turn 7, through the left-hand kink of turn 8, which sees you go past the support pit lane and hurtle down to the left-hand loop, almost a horseshoe through the new left-hander from a couple of years ago.
A Ferradura.
And he's a little bit down on this time. I think that was compared to Stroll's middle sector, but just gearing up nicely is Charles Leclerc, who didn't start this weekend with the best preparation. Was saying he was struck down with a little bit of recovering from a little bit of food poisoning before going in to free practice 1. And you know what? He's just coming through the last couple of corners now, Jolien. So coming through turns sort of 15 and 16. And we saw this a lot yesterday. The cars really seem to bottom out quite a lot there. You see sort of scuffs and almost what looks like smoke coming out of the underside of the car.
just the planks striking out. As the cars are building up high speed, they sit lower and lower to the ground, and then that corner now is flat out through 15, and it's quicker before around the hotel as well, so the speeds are building and building and building. Then you turn right with a load of downforce on the car, and the plank just strikes out, and it was quite harsh there on the Ferrari. You can't run the car too low, because you'll be in the realms of illegality. You'll have too much plank wear and you get disqualified, but you want to run it as low as you can get away with, because that's where the downforce is. So it's constantly a bit of a trade-off, and there's usually one or two places on the circuit where you've really got to be careful.
I need to remove this sticker on my inside my cockpit, please.
Yeah, okay, copy. It's Lewis Hamilton on the radio, complaining about a sticker that is on the inside of his cockpit, wanting that to be removed. They used to have a sticker of the track map, didn't they, inside the cockpit of some Formula One cars. I don't know if they still do that. Did you have anything stuck inside when you were in the Renault?
Certainly in the junior categories more, but that was just, it's not so you know where to go, because you know the corners, but actually it's for when you're having a debrief and you need to remember the corner names, or the names of the numbers is what drivers and engineers really refer to everything as, and it's so that you're on the same page when you're talking. So Lando Norris just completes a lap there and goes second. Now he'll back off, and you can hear him already taking the downshifts and getting ready for a cool lap on the softs, and now he'll be on the radio and give a little bit of feedback as to understeer at turn 9, oversteer at turn 6, rolling off the brakes, it's into this. And that is part of the makeup of a Formula One driver, to be giving your concise but accurate feedback, so the engineers can tell you if there's anything they think you can do from the cockpit. You've got plenty of things to change, brake balance, but also differential settings, engine braking settings, but also for when you're back in the garage to have a bigger look at the setup. And there's so much of it that you need to get these cars in the right setup window. We saw it in Qatar, how Red Bull, for the sprint, struggling, for the race, the pace. And that's to do with just honing the setup of the car. So the driver's map is simply so that everyone's on the same page.
So, for instance, yesterday we saw and heard Max Verstappen in the Red Bull particularly struggling with understeer, it seemed, was not happy with the grip and the turn-in of that Red Bull. What conversations and what are they actually doing physically overnight to that car after FP2 coming into FP3?
Well, the first thing is that you have a big debrief with the drivers. It'll be Verstappen and Perez sitting in the Red Bull engineering office, and they'll go through everything on that car for that day, but particularly FP2, the session first. Max will give his feedback, which was front axle wasn't working, so he's not getting the front end to bite. So then it's a question of what can you do to make it work. The obvious thing to try and get the front to work is to add front wing angle, which gives you more front downforce, and downforce is the biggest factor that can help things. Then you're looking at your ride height as well to get the whole car working into a different window. And then on top of that, apart from your smallest cockpit settings, you're looking at suspension settings. So your roll stiffness, front anti-roll bar, maybe a little bit of damping to try and help in various areas as well. There is a lot to play with in these cars to get them into the right window, but it's trying to work out the balance, and that's why you need accurate feedback from the driver to understand exactly the feeling, because just cranking on front wing angle, it might help to get the fronts working, but you might then inherit other issues somewhere else. So if you can get the most precise feedback, the engineers have a lot of tools available to play with to try and help. And also for a team like Red Bull, they've got a really good simulator system back at Milton Keynes in the factory, and they've got drivers there working into the night, overnight, to try and actually work on setups as well. So it's quite a big advantage for some of the big teams to have someone else doing a bit of legwork, and then you chuck it on the car and hope that your champion likes it for the next day.
Yeah, it's not the first time this season that we've seen overnight work done back at base in Milton Keynes and a turnaround the following day on track for Red Bull. Max Verstappen on the medium tyres just come across the line and gone 5th fastest. This is the sound of his teammate Sergio Perez, who is on the soft tyre and slots into 6th place, fastest of anybody in the middle sector, with 36 minutes and 32 seconds remaining of this final practice session of the year Kevin Magnussen is currently fastest for Haas, ahead of Lando Norris. Then it's Hülkenberg, Piastri, Verstappen and Perez, the top 6. Then it's Gasly, Alonso, Zhou and Bottas, the top 10. Stroll is in 11th ahead of Doohan, who has replaced Esteban Ocon for this race. Charles Leclerc is down in 13th ahead of Carlos Sainz. Then it's Lawson, Tsunoda. Those are the cars that have all set any kind of lap time, and we're still waiting for laps to come through from George Russell. He's on an outlap at the moment, just coming through the middle sector. Hamilton is back in the pits, wanting a sticker to be removed from the inside of his cockpit. Albon is back out onto the track, currently on a flyer. Franco Colapinto has not emerged from the pits yesterday. He had a problem, took a curve very hard yesterday with his damaged his floor. Williams deciding not to run that car for the rest of free practice too, so Colapinto and Williams might well be on the back foot. They already are, with both drivers having 5-place grid penalties for exceeding their gearbox allocation. Jenny Gow.
Yes, it seems appropriate that Kevin Magnussen, when he last read out, and he is still leading the runnings at the moment, he's got a returning race engineer. His race engineer this weekend is Dominic Haynes, and this has all come about very suddenly. He's used to be engineered by Mark Slade, who we all know, and he's been in the F1 paddock for a very long time, and went to Haas. And I don't know what happened between the last race and this one, but he is not here, and he is not race engineering Kevin Magnussen for his last race at Haas. So it's all a bit strange, but Dominic is obviously doing a dream for him at the moment as he leads through practice 3.
Well, K-Mag had a good run in Qatar, so I don't think it's performance-driven that Mark Slade, who's one of the most experienced race engineers in the paddock, isn't there. But things are going well for Haas anyway. Magnussen top of the times, a couple of flying laps on the board. Hülkenberg has got a couple of flying laps on the board and is third. This is the sound on board the German, flashing past a load of cars on the back straight, sweeping to the left, and now he's about to hurtle speed into turn 9. He's on a decent lap here. Personal best in the first and second sector. That turn 9 is so quick. You're searching for the throttle as soon as you get in towards an apex. Now we're into the triple right at the hotel, and he's got a massive snap of oversteer for the final part, which is the real corner there, down at turn 12. Through the 2 lefts, and quick as a flash, you're back now towards the end of the lap, flat out through 15. The final right-hander, 90 degrees to the right, stay within track limits. Hülkenberg just about does that, but with his big snap of oversteer, it's only a minor improvement, and he stays in third.
It's been a good season for Nico Hülkenberg. 12 points finishes in Grand Prix and Sprint throughout this season, although Qatar might be one to forget for the German after last weekend, ended up spinning out and taking his 4th retirement of the season. Bit of a blip in performance for Hülkenberg last time out in that Grand Prix, at least, with Magnussen getting those crucial points. And it's a big weekend for Haas as well. 6th place in the Constructors is only separated by 5 points, and at the moment Haas are the ones chasing. They are behind Alpine because Pierre Gasly managed to bag 10 points last time in Qatar, and then of course that double Sao Paulo podium for the Alpine team is what really cemented their challenge in that 6th fight. RB are still in it as well. They're a couple of points back on Haas, down in 8th. Then Williams are pretty much on their own with 17 points to their name. And Sauber are ending the year with some positives. There seems to be an upturn in performance there. They are bringing some new parts to the last couple of races, or they did last weekend, and they've got more for this round 2, and they managed to pick up 4 points courtesy of Zhou Guanyu running to 8th place last time out. So the championship challenge is still on at the front, but it literally is millions of dollars of prize money worth up for grabs.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. Car feels okay. Just very slow.
The voice of George Russell, who is just shuffled now down to 19th position. Says the car feels okay. He's 1.5 seconds off the pace, and he's 1.1 seconds away from his teammate Lewis Hamilton, who jumps up to 4th.
Yeah, Russell then sounding a little bit dejected over the radio. Liam Lawson in the RB has just come across the line to put himself ahead of Russell. And Carlos Sainz is also down there in 18th at the moment. He's been on the medium tyre though, and he's on a lap at the moment.
He's about to improve. Sainz in the Ferrari. Leclerc up in 6th. Sainz on the mediums, as you say, sweeping through again. Massive plank wear from the Ferrari, just puffing puffing smoke out of the back from turn 15, the quick right-hander. Sainz improves on the mediums and goes up to 10th place. Like for like on tyres with Verstappen, they're the two on the mediums. Sainz is a 10th and a half slower.
The two RBs are on the hard tyre as well. They're the only drivers out there on the hardest compound. Franco Colapinto in the Williams has finally emerged from the pit lane after a lengthy, well, he didn't even start the session really, and as I said, had to vacate his seat halfway through yesterday's free practice 2 session with a bit of curb striking, causing damage to the underside and the floor of his Williams. He's coming around the final corner now, and that Williams absolutely squirming as he applies the throttle and gets his first proper lap time on the board to go 18th fastest, 1.2 seconds off at the moment. His teammate Albon is up in 9th, that's 6/10 off Magnussen's fastest lap.
He's loose as a goose, isn't he, Franco Colapinto? Last thing we saw of him was yesterday doing that damage on the exit of turn 9, having a big swapper. Same again today?
Correct.
Yeah, we saw that.
Joe complaining about not very much there. Sergio Perez in the high speed, it has to be said, but Joe managed, I think, to keep his foot pinned as he came past him, and he's in 14th position.
Some more sort of almost, it looks like the engine is blowing up for Carlos Sainz as he runs down out of the high speed right-hander of turn 3, but this is more, well, bottoming out, is it, from the Ferrari?
Yeah, it is. Again, it's the high-speed sections. They've got to raise that car because that's just too much on the Ferrari. We saw it with Leclerc earlier on. He's back in the pits. Sainz just improved, and it's again the high speed. The car is building up speed, it's building up downforce, and then it's just sitting down with the plank scraping along the ground. And for Sainz is too much. They're pushing the boundaries of what they can get away with here, Ferrari. They know they need every iota of performance that they can get, and I think they've gone too far there.
This is the sound of George Russell, who is ambling down the straight into the left-hander of turn 6, and then uphill slightly through and out the right-hander of turn 7. Russell not happy with how his performance is at the moment. Here's what he's saying on the radio now.
Yeah, let me know what you're thinking. Right now, I don't really have any major thoughts. I don't really know why the pace is so bad.
What was my balance limitation on that lap then?
Well, nothing major, mate. It's, yeah, I mean, everything feels reasonably normal, but it's just all slow.
He's bamboozled, isn't he, George Russell? At the bottom, the pole sitter from last weekend, and he is now 20th and last, 1.5 seconds off the pace. It's very strange when you have that. When the typical thing is you have the debrief at the end of a lap and you say, right, what the first thing is exactly what his race engineer Marcus Dudley then just asked. What is the balance? So what is your limitation? Why can you not go quicker through any given corner? Is it because the fronts are sliding, so you're understeering off the road? Or is it that the rear's sliding and you're about to swap ends, you're about to have a spin? You always have a limitation. There's always a reason you cannot go quicker. But you hope that it's a little bit of both at the same time, really, which means that the balance is good. And effectively, that's what Russell's saying on the radio. The car feels okay. I'm not having any particular issue with the fronts or the rears. I've just got no pace, and he hasn't. He's 1.5 seconds off. He's going for another lap now to see if he can make any better of a second flying lap. And that sort of feels like there's a bigger issue with the car then for Russell. He's had a set down yesterday. It's put back together for today, and it's a very strange thing when the car feels like it's sort of relatively balanced, but it's just not quick.
Perplexing then for George Russell, who is plumb last. He's on a better lap this time around, though, so let's see how he gets on coming through the middle sector. Piastri's fastest of anybody through the first sector at the moment, although off the pace when it comes to the middle sector, down on Magnussen's best time. It's an important year next year for George Russell in the Mercedes, the leader of that Mercedes team, up against somebody in Kimi Antonelli, who is quite possibly one of the highest rated rookie drivers coming into a season that I can remember, maybe even since Lewis Hamilton. We saw glimpses of his pace in that FP1 outing in Monza, but of course that ended with him in the wall and rubbed a bit of the sheen off him. But there is still a sense of, well, Antonelli is this wonder kid, and Russell has an important year ahead of him. On paper, he should beat Antonelli and cement himself as the leader of that team. But it's not a slam dunk.
It actually could be career-defining for George Russell. He's been up against Lewis Hamilton. He's done very well against Hamilton. He's beaten Lewis this year. But it's always difficult when you have a young, talented rookie coming in, because the expectation is now for Russell to step up and lead the team. But these guys are in the team because they're supremely talented youngsters, and often they have nothing to fear. So they come in, they give it large, and look, Antonelli needs to make a name for himself next year as well. It's a rapid promotion that he's had, and he needs to justify that, and he needs to show his talent. Otherwise, he could be in and out of Formula 1 very quickly as well. Russell has to stamp his authority on that team, and if it's even close with Antonelli next year, that doesn't reflect that well on the more experienced and inverted commas team leader, really. We see it time and time again. Do you remember Sebastian Vettel with Charles Leclerc joining Ferrari? Leclerc made his life very uncomfortable. So did Daniel Ricciardo at Red Bull before. Even Russell himself joining Hamilton has made Lewis's life pretty uncomfortable. It can often be difficult, so he has to step up to the plate. He's had a really good end to this year, which will give him confidence.
Yeah, Russell did improve on that last lap around, managed to get himself up from 20th and last all the way up to 10th place. So, Jenny, the two Mercedes, well, incremental gains at the moment. Russell now about 7/10 off the pace. Hamilton a little better at this stage. He's just been knocked down to 6th, though, because Carlos Sainz has gone up to 2nd in the Ferrari.
Yeah, I'm just looking in the garage at Mercedes and thinking about Kimi Antonelli and the way that Mercedes manage their young drivers. It's a very different scheme, isn't it, to the likes of, let's say, Red Bull, who are just one garage up. They're really protecting Kimi Antonelli, and they're letting him come to fruition quite gradually, so they're not exposing him to the media. They're protecting him from that, and they're not putting him out too much when it comes to the actual going out on the car in FP1. And you think of how raw it is for a Red Bull driver when they're young and coming into F1. They're expected to perform straight away, and I don't feel Kimi Antonelli will be expected to perform in the terms that they do at Red Bull. He'll be given more of a grace period, but he'll want to perform and they'll want him to perform. But you know what I mean? It's very different.
I don't see that this is actually that different, Jenny. The guy's just turned 18.
Really? Oh,
He's
no.
just turned 18 in August. He was announced as a 17-year-old joining Formula 1. He didn't even do F3. He's going straight into 1 year of F2, where he's been solid but not spectacular. And then Mercedes are promoting him into the main team to replace Lewis Hamilton. Maybe they're not expecting him to be a champion next year, but this is the rapid promotion that we're so used to seeing from Red Bull. This is, I think, Mercedes taking a leaf out of Red Bull's book.
The comparison surely has to be against Max Verstappen, another of the drivers who skipped F3. He didn't even do F2. He went straight into Formula 1.
With Toro Rosso.
Exactly. But he had time to bed in, but he still had to show what he could do in terms of performance. And then when he did get that call up to Red Bull, he went and won it in his first race.
Yeah, he was very impressive, but he was certainly a rough diamond, wasn't he, in the first year with Toro Rosso. Super talented, did a great job, deserved a call up, and the rest is history with Verstappen. But to be promoted straight into a race-winning car, aged 18, this is borderline uncharted territory. Of course, Lewis Hamilton did that with McLaren in 2007. Jacques Villeneuve came in 97, but he had a lot more experience. He'd come from racing in America. Raikkonen came in with Sauber. It's different. It's different to come in like George Russell came in with Williams and then moved up the ranks, and he'd done his time as a Formula 2 champion. I can't remember someone having as rapid a promotion as Kimi Antonelli and then being thrust into a race-winning car immediately. Even if you think the pressure's off, the pressure's on for him.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Verstappen did, he did a European Formula 3 as it was at the time, and then didn't do the GP3 and GP2 as it once was. But as you say, he got that almost grace period that you get when you come into a midfield team, and Toro Rosso weren't really the top end of the midfield anyway at that time.
And with Formula 1, it's all about the comparison with your teammate. So Verstappen came in and was alongside Carlos Sainz, but they were both rookies together. So your measuring stick is another rookie, and you've got a chance to beat them. And they were actually very evenly matched overall, and they both did a decent job, and that's why they're both still sticking around as race winners or champions. Kimi Raikkonen came into Sauber, the most rapid of promotions, straight from Formula Renault, effectively a Formula 4 level, to Formula 1. Amazing promotion. And then he was in a Sauber, so midfield, alongside Nick Heidfeld, a midfield driver. The other thing is, when you come into a top team, you race alongside a top driver. And that's what, obviously, Hamilton had in 2007, coming up alongside, off the back of the two-time world champion Fernando Alonso. Peak of his powers, tough metric, did amazing. Antonelli's kind of got that with Russell, a guy that's actually just beating Lewis Hamilton, and now Antonelli's coming in with such inexperience to take on Russell, who's driving really well and is clearly an assertive force in Formula 1.
So big if, Antonelli beats Russell next season,
holy smokes,
is that Russell Formula 1 career over, or is that Russell going to another team, get out of there quick?
Possibly he'll pull the ripcord on Mercedes, because you want to be... Look, Russell wants to be a champion. So all of the drivers want to be a champion, but Russell's got the potential right now to achieve that in the right car, in the right moment. As soon as Antonelli comes in age 18, and if he beats Russell, then Mercedes will start to galvanise behind Antonelli. The guy is so young, they've backed him since karting, they really believe in his talent, hence the rapid promotion. So Russell needs to show that he is the guy for Mercedes, and if Mercedes decide to actually think Antonelli might be the guy, it's a difficult position for the incumbent driver to then stick around, as sort of Sebastian Vettel found out. It happens through time. So then Russell maybe will look at a possible Red Bull, depending on what happens to Verstappen, maybe an Aston Martin, or maybe he'll just actually dig in and fight it out at Mercedes, but it will be a question mark. I'd say the driver that's done a great job in this position is Lando Norris, because Oscar Piastri has been in Formula 1 now 2 seasons, and this guy came into Formula 1 with as good a CV as you can have. Champion across the board, effectively F4 level, F3, F2, blitzing his way through. McLaren signed him, snaffled him away from Alpine, paid him a lot of money, had huge expectations, and Oscar's been great, but Lando is clearly ahead still. And as a result, McLaren have to, well, even as close as it's been this year, but they have to prioritise Lando if it gets close in the championship. Next year will be a clean slate again, but you have to assert yourself in the team. And if Piastri had come in and beaten Norris, it becomes very difficult for Lando to sustain.
It sets it up so nicely for another one of the amazing storylines that we're going to get to witness play out in 2025. And, well, it won't be long to go until we're all gearing up for pre-season testing in Bahrain at the start of next year before round 1 in Melbourne. Out on track, by the way, 18 minutes and 28 seconds remain. Magnussen is still fastest. Then it's Sainz on the medium tyre. Verstappen also on the medium tyre in third. Then it's Norris, Hamilton, the top 5. Perez, Hülkenberg, Piastri, Leclerc, Gasly is 10th ahead of Russell. Then comes Albon, who's fastest of anybody in the first sector right now, and Bottas 13th, Alonso, Colapinto 15th ahead of Joe, Stroll, Doohan, and the 2 RBs adrift on the hard tyre though. Tsunoda ahead of Lawson, 19th and 20th.
Yeah, different run plan for those guys in the first part. They have thrown on the hard tyre to see what that's all about. Albon is the fastest man through 2 sectors, quarter of a second up on Kevin Magnussen as he comes through the exit at turn 9, building the speed, flat out through 10, flat out through 11, and picks a braking point for turn 12 in front of the hotel. Plenty of onlookers sipping some champagne in the early afternoon sun, watching the Williams flash by on a very fast lap on a new set of soft tyres here. Alex Albon sweeping through 15, finding the brakes, shuffling down a couple of gears, and he's got the grip through the final corner as well. He goes to the top of the times.
Less than a tenth separating Albon and Magnussen. That Williams lineup next year is, again, another one of the fascinating storylines we'll be following. Alex Albon will be alongside Carlos Sainz, 2 scorned Red Bull juniors lining up in a Williams team as they try and fight their way back up the grid. One man who's been demoted from the best team in Formula 1 history to one of the poorest performing teams in the current era, alongside a man who's rebuilt his reputation at that team over the last few seasons. That dynamic is going to be a fascinating one to watch.
It's going to be interesting to see who comes out on top there. In theory, you'd say Sainz at the moment, race winner. He's done a great job in the Ferrari. But I think Albon is very talented as well. Had the chance alongside Verstappen, didn't make the most of it. Difficult situation for him early in his career. He's been good at Williams, but he's exactly the case study of new youngster comes in, does well, and it just sort of dimmed Albon's star, didn't it, in the summer when Colapinto came in and started being pretty close to him. You think, is Albon actually that good? But it is one of those things that, rookies come in and can make your life hard, and it does make a difference. Whereas next year, Sainz comes in. The hope is on Sainz lifting the Williams team alongside Albon, and if Albon can show well against Carlos Sainz, that's the benchmark, really. There's a guy that's a race winner, and you think, these two could both be race winners in the right machinery.
Well, currently Williams P1 with Alex Albon, 1:24.3, the fastest lap time. Colapinto is also out there running. Well, he's in the pits at the moment. He's down in 15th after a slow, delayed start to this session. For the other Williams driver, his future unknown at the moment. Likely a year on the sidelines, kept within the Williams fold, but there is still some shuffling to be done at Team Red Bull.
The balance shifted like crazy on her.
So the balance shifted in one single lap there for Albon. So 16 corners around this circuit. And typically that means you start to pick up oversteer towards the end of the lap. We saw it earlier on with Hülkenberg was on a good lap with the Haas. We've seen a few drivers start to find some oversteer moments in the final sector. You're leaning on the rear tyre a lot in these traction zones, especially turn 9, the quick left-hander up. It's so much energy as you're sweeping through over 4G for a good few seconds there through the apex. The energy is building, and the rear tyres, especially the soft tyres, which they're all running now, just start to give up on you. It didn't look too bad for Albon as we saw the lap, but it was good enough to go top. But it couldn't keep up the same pace as Norris. Actually, he's got the fastest third sector time at the end of the lap. So there's a little bit more potentially to come. But is it a trade-off between the first sector grip and the third sector grip? That's the difficulty.
Also, how much can you take from sessions like this? We talk about representative, unrepresentative, very much so here in Abu Dhabi, because the race and qualifying kind of begins as the sun is setting. It's dusk, then it slowly starts to set, and nighttime temperatures drop. So how much can we really glean from the majority of these practice sessions that are run during the daytime?
Yeah, FP1 particularly is unrepresentative because also the track needs rubbering in. So at this point, at least, it's more rubbered in. The track surface has got some grip, but the temperature makes the tyre life very difficult. As we get into the cooler night temperatures later, that balance shift through a lap will be better. The rear tyres will hang on better through the lap. The engineers will have a typical offset of what to do with the balance, with pretty much the front wing angle in day temperatures to night temperatures. The track temperature probably drop 10 degrees at least later on, which can make a big difference. It is not as representative as you'd like it to be, but it's the best you get around this place.
Well, getting a few more cars heading out onto the track in the last 13 minutes of this session. The Ferraris still both in their garage, Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. Jenny Gal, I think you can see them.
I can. I've just been moved out of the way of Carlos Sainz's car, which means he will come out imminently. In fact, both of them are preparing to come out. A lot of work going on Carlos Sainz's left side of the car. Sorry, my mistake. They were checking out whether he'd hit the curb or whether there was some damage to the front left tyre. All seems fine, but they have taken some photos, and those photos will be sent back and they'll be poured over in great detail. But they have bolted on a set of these soft Pirelli red compounds, and they'll both go out. I think Leclerc will go out first and then Carlos Sainz.
That Ferrari car was scraping itself along the ground particularly badly, so I wonder if it's lost a little bit of bodywork somewhere in that, or they're just trying to have a better look at the front angle of the floor or something that's been particularly affected. This is the sound of George Russell on a new set of soft tyres. Let's see if this is a better lap for him.
Yeah, getting a few performance runs right at the end of this session. Car sticking on the soft tyre. Russell through the left-hander as he makes his way round turn 9. Then it gets tight and twisty through the hotel section. The right-hander at turn 12 arcs through the left-hander under the bridge momentarily as the Mercedes is plunged into the shade before it emerges out into the broad daylight through the double right-handers that see off a lap of this Yas Marina circuit. The right-hander of turn 16 runs a little wide, scrapes the floor over the red and white curbs on the exit, finds time though and goes to the top of the times, a 1:24.0 for Russell.
At 8 seconds back on the circuit is Oscar Piastri, and he sweeps through, lowering the benchmark 0.6 quicker than the Mercedes. So McLaren back on the pace, and they still look to be the form team. Plenty of other drivers though on a fast lap.
I think it might be a little bit ominous for the two McLarens. Lando Norris saying after yesterday's session, free practice 2, where they topped the times, that there was more to come in terms of their pace. Norris a little bit down on his teammate though in the middle sector.
Yeah, not far away, 10th down overall. Hulkenberg's just on the best middle sector of anyone. Haas are flying so far. Nico Hulkenberg was third quickest yesterday. Magnussen was quickest on the first run earlier on in FP3. They're unleashing everything to get back to 6th in the constructors. Magnussen crosses the line and goes up to 3rd. But Lando Norris, can he depose his teammate at the top of the times? Big gulf between 1st and 2nd, and that is filled by Lando Norris, who jumps 2nd. 2 tenths though down on Oscar Piastri.
Yeah, Piastri, Norris and Russell the top 3. But what about Nico Hulkenberg in the Haas, as you were saying, Jolien, was on a mega lap. The middle sector in particular, mighty, and there is only 1,000th of a second splitting the two Haas cars on their first soft tyre runs. Hulkenberg 4th, Magnussen 5th.
The two Ferraris are on out laps at the moment, so we'll see their response to the McLaren 1-2 shortly. The response from Max Verstappen is to be right out on the cusp of track limits, but just about okay. It doesn't even matter in free practice, but it will in qualifying. He's 4 tenths down, 3rd place.
10 minutes to go then in this final practice session. The last chance to gather data on your car's performance before we head into qualifying for the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. You can hear qualifying later on today at 1:55 in the afternoon. Our coverage begins ahead of the session starting at 2 o'clock on the dot on 5 Sports Extra, as Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda in the RB has just gone up to 7th place, 9 tenths down. So in that battle for 6th in the constructors, it certainly feels like it's advantage Haas right now based on these early performance times.
So the Ferrari's on a flying lap now, but they're slow in the first sector. Leclerc is 2 tenths down on Piastri in the first sector alone, which is 1 corner.
My brakes are not working, the front axle, then biting. It's like they're glazed or something.
Okay, copy that.
So that's a comment on the brakes being glazed for Verstappen. So he's not getting the bite as he smashes the left pedal, the brake pedal. And there was a similar feedback to what he had yesterday, struggling with understeer. And if you can have a brake that's working and you get deceleration, you get a little bit of pitch and dive as you hit the brakes, get the front down, and it helps to get the car turned in. But if you're not able to get the deceleration, it changes the whole way through the corner. And Verstappen's still not the happiest with his performance at the moment. Sainz quick through the middle sector. Leclerc coming to the end of the lap as well. Let's see what the Ferraris can do.
Hamilton just taking the line as well. Quick in the long run pace yesterday. Short run pace at the moment. A little off, down in 7th, 7 tenths back. The first of the Ferraris though does indeed cross the line. Down in 8th for Charles Leclerc. Reminder, he'll take a 10 place grid drop from wherever he qualifies for a new battery pack in that Ferrari. This is the sound of his teammate Carlos Sainz, fastest of anybody in the middle sector. Still ends the lap 4 tenths adrift from the quickest McLaren, Oscar Piastri. Sainz slots into 4th.
As Perez comes through and goes 14th in the second Red Bull, 6 tenths down on his teammate. McLaren have got a huge advantage at the moment, haven't they? They're dialed in. We did see how it turned around in Qatar last week, where they had the pace on the Friday and then it went away for the main qualifying and they couldn't get a front row between them. But right now they've got a bigger margin than they've had probably at any point in the season through FP2 yesterday and FP3, the two meaningful practice sessions.
Coming back to our chat a little earlier about how well Lando Norris has performed against Oscar Piastri, as we would expect, Norris with the more experience, but Piastri coming in with one of the best CV you possibly can. Looking back on this season for Piastri, how do you rate his year? Because it has been a brilliant year for him. He's only in his second season. But is there a case that, well, were we expecting a little more from him? I mean, some of the stats are 17 consecutive points finishes is nice.
Piastri P1, 23-4. We are nowhere.
Leclerc being told the gap to Piastri and replying, we are nowhere. Leclerc is down in 9th. Piastri is currently quickest. But, of course, Piastri having the win in Budapest and Baku as well, managing to soak up the pressure. Fantastic overtake on the Ferrari in Azerbaijan. The Qatar sprint, obviously, he was handed that win. But having done the team work in the Sao Paulo sprint, was getting payback for that. He's proven to be a top draw driver, but I just wonder, were we expecting a little more from Piastri this year?
I think I was, because he had such a good end to the year last year. He was very quick, won the sprint in Qatar last season, was right there with Norris in qualifying pace really. And this year, whilst he's had the headlines, I've been super impressed with his racecraft this year. Some of his wins have been just beautifully executed. In Baku, the lunge on Leclerc. In Monza, he didn't win the race, but he kind of should have done had McLaren not stuffed the strategy up. And again, his move on Norris was absolutely perfect at the second chicane. The problem is for Piastri, his pace isn't quite good enough at the moment to be a top-line driver. He's about to come through the final corner here, and he might even lower the benchmark as he comes through over the line, and he doesn't quite with the tyres going away. He is the pace setter here today, but too many times on the Saturday he's just been off Norris's pace. Often not by much, occasionally by a little bit more, but the raw stat is that it's 19-4 in qualifying to Norris. It's the third most one-sided qualifying of the whole field. Only Perez and Zhou have been on the receiving end of a bigger discrepancy. And I think that some of Oscar, the race wins and some of the brilliant racecraft have made up for the fact that he has played second fiddle to Norris this year. I rate Norris extremely highly because Piastri's come in. We all thought that he could be the champion. I mentioned it already. His CV was incredible, but Norris has stepped up, and you've got to say fair play to Lando for doing that. I still think Norris has got a chance to be a future champion. The pace that he's delivering on a regular basis is really good. There are chinks in his armour, as we've seen with the race starts. Sometimes the communication on the radio is not good enough, but fundamentally he's seen off Piastri this year as he drives off the road at the final sector. He'll get back on under the hotel, and I think for that reason you've got to think I sort of thought Piastri would be a more consistent threat to Norris.
I think he has been a more consistent threat to Norris. He's spurred Norris on to be the driver and to challenge Max Verstappen as he has, and I think you're right that he has dropped off towards the end of this season. He hasn't been as good as he was, but at the beginning and middle of this season I was really impressed by him, and I think the two of them will potentially be championship challengers next year, and I think he's right in the mix.
Well, theoretically, if McLaren win the Constructors and they come out the blocks quick, then they should both be championship challengers. But is there an argument to say that, well, Lando Norris is 6 years in Formula One now? He should be performing at this level. Oscar Piastri is only in his second year developing. Is the ceiling higher?
Well, this is the question, but you're always going to have the argument as their teammates that Norris will always be more experienced. That's the fact, unless he takes a year out or 4 years out. He's always going to be more experienced. At some point you have to narrow the gap. Piastri's not narrowed it this year. The end of last year he was closer on average to Norris in terms of, I'm talking qualifying pace, but qualifying pace is so much of the job in Formula One. And last year, at the end part of last year, he was actually closer than he has been throughout the course of this year. So if you want to play the inexperienced card, you have to be narrowing the gap. And Oscar largely hasn't done that this year. The race stats as well, Norris has been ahead a lot. And look, I'm a fan of Piastri. I love his demeanour in and out of the car. he's a great asset to the team, but the facts are the facts, and Norris has really kind of dispatched him pretty well this season. It's not to say Oscar can't have more potential and he can't work on it. I think things like his race pace generally has been more competitive this year than it was last year. So whilst his qualifying pace hasn't closed up, his race pace has, but he is still certainly overall the inferior McLaren driver. But you know, we're measuring up against a proven race winner now in Norris. In fact, Piastri's a proven race winner himself, but Norris has demolished Daniel Ricciardo. He's a very good driver, so it's not to say Piastri's not, but the facts are the facts, and he is certainly behind Norris still on a consistent basis. And if they're running together in the race and Piastri's ahead of Norris, Norris will be on his tail, probably to the end of the race or the end of the stint. If Norris is ahead of Piastri, Norris sometimes drives off and drives away from him, and there's a bigger gap between them.
15-8 in Norris's favour when it comes race head-to-heads.
Yeah, and that's a pretty big gap. So I still think Oscar's done well. He's a great team player. We saw it in Brazil this year. I think he's a good asset for the team. As a sort of inverted commas second driver goes, he's superb. But if he wants to be a first driver, it's not going to come to his lap. He needs to find something more, because at the moment he is in Norris's shadow.
Absolutely. I think 2025, Jen, is going to be another critical year for another driver, and this time for Oscar Piastri. Red Bull, though, what news, Jenny, do you have from them? Verstappen's on an outlap at the moment, I think. Perez out there too.
Exactly. Yeah, Verstappen, they just brought him in with about 3 minutes to go. They did some fiddling about the back of the car. I think they're still trying to work on the balance for him to send him out again. So he is, as you say, on an outlap and just looking for one more flyer, but I don't know if it's going to come to him.
Yeah, currently down in, well, he's in fourth spot. Perez once again languishing on the periphery of the top 10.
Yeah, be heading up for a practice start as well, which you do at the end of the session. So even though he won't get another flyer in Verstappen, as we've got 15 seconds to the checkered flag, it'll at least give him a chance to feel something at the car and to get a practice start as he launches wide on the exit of turn 1. Fighting the rear of the car, the front of the car took him there. It's a 4/10 gap from Verstappen to Piastri, who is the pace man in this session and will stay there.
Yeah, you're not actually allowed to do a practice start at the end of the pit lane here in Abu Dhabi.
It flings you downhill into the tunnel, so it'll be pretty lethal.
As a driver, when you take that, is it a bit of a bizarre feeling, sort of plunging downwards into the darkness, almost like you're coming out of a car park?
Yeah, I'd never really thought of it like that. Just a different part of the circuit. But I quite like the pit exit. I like novelty in Formula One. I'm all for something that marks the track out as something different, and the pit exit is that. For so many years, everyone said, there's going to be, at one point, a blockage in the pit exit. There's going to be a crash. I've only seen it once in Formula 2 when Sean Gillisle came out of the pits in a race and locked the fronts and heaved it into the wall. It's never happened in Formula 1. Generally, these drivers are capable of getting out of the pits. You have to take it at full speed, though, in a race. You can't dawdle through that.
No, and then it feeds you out almost halfway through the quick right-hander of turn 3. So you basically skip turns 1 and 2 as you drive underneath and out of the pits. Checkered flag falls then on free practice 3, and that's the final practice session of the season, done and dusted, and it is looking mighty for the two McLarens right now. Piastri, fastest of the lot, 2/10 separating himself and Lando Norris. Lewis Hamilton with a good lap at the end, getting himself up to 3rd, but the closest contender is 4/10 away from McLaren. Verstappen 4th, Sainz is 5th, ahead of Russell. The two Haas cars looking strong too. Hulkenberg ahead of Magnussen. Leclerc saying they are nowhere when it comes to their pace. Ferrari trying to clinch their first Constructors' Championship since 2008 this weekend. Leclerc down in 9th. Perez rounds out the top 10. Tsunoda, Albon, Gasly, Jack Doohan and Fernando Alonso, the top 15 ahead of Bottas. Lawson, Stroll, Zhou Guanyu and Franco Colapinto in the Williams, 20th and last. Jenny.
Still quite hot down here, but the sun will set ahead of qualifying, and it should be a real shootout this afternoon as it turns into evening, and the conditions will be so different out on track. Well, loosened temperature, it'll be lit up and illuminated by those massive floodlights. I can't wait.
It's going to be a spectacle. It always is, just for the images, but also it is the final qualifying of the year. And Jolyon Palmer, at this stage, is it between the two McLarens right now?
It seems to be, but with the circuit, it's constantly evolving. The temperatures are going to drop, the track's going to change, it's going to grip up immeasurably through the qualifying hour alone. So you've always got to stay on top of it. McLaren seemed at the pace, but I'm sure that everyone else is going to be scratching their heads, working out how they can get towards that.
Further down the order, who's caught your eye as well?
Haas. Both cars looking really quick. They are 7th in the Constructors' Championship. They were jumped by Pierre Gasly alone in the last race in the Alpine. Doohan actually did a good job in that session, got close to Gasly's pace. They were 13th and 14th in Alpines, but Haas 7th and 8th, ahead of Leclerc. They look decent. They could be on for double points, which is exactly what they need.
Yeah, it was actually pretty decent from Doohan at the end. Both Gasly and Doohan are 1:24.4, only about 30 thousandths of a second separating Jack Doohan from his experienced teammate Pierre Gasly. Jack Doohan, the Australian driver, who we were expecting to make his debut next year in Australia for the Alpine team ahead of his full season. Well, he got the call up one race early to replace Esteban Ocon, so we have now lost Ocon for the year. He'll be back next season with Haas, that exit being done to allow Ocon to go testing next week with the Haas team, because even though the sun will set and the checkered flag will come for Sunday's Grand Prix for the 2024 season, the Formula One cars stay in Abu Dhabi for some Pirelli tyre testing and young driver testing as well, which will be certainly something to have a look at. Practice starts now being done on the grid. Lando Norris with a decent getaway and then running out wide coming through turn 1. It is always a tough run down to that first corner for the Grand Prix, but I think that just about does it then for us in practice. The data is gathered, it will now be poured over, final setup changes made going into qualifying, which you can join us for over on 5 Sports Extra. We'll be on air from 5 to 2 ahead of the session starting time at 2 o'clock. Right now it's advantage McLaren, Piastri and Norris fastest at the end of the final practice 3 session. My thanks to the former Formula One driver Jolyon Palmer. Thank you to Jenny Gow down in the pits for us. Join us again in a couple of hours time for qualifying, and this has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.